Ah, I love knowing we can edit.
It's fantastic. The freedom of being
Freedom.
able to edit.
If only we had that in our real life.
It's oh man, I could use that. I could use that undo button sometimes.
Oh, gosh, but how much time would we spend looking back at moments that have already happened versus like living forward?
And it's like really, I can't tell you how many things I would undo, like I would have undone in the moment, but then looking back on it years later, I'm like, oh man, that sucked, but that was like the best thing that could have happened to me. That I wouldn't have listened if hadn't sucked so much. So yeah, maybe a good thing we don't have the undo button.
Yeah, knowing how long it takes me to edit an episode sometimes, I don't want that for my life. I'd still be stuck on a day from like 6 years ago.
I would abuse the shit out of that undo button. I mean, it's a really good thing that I don't have one.
Cool. Well, we're gonna do the thing. I have a little set of questions and just some concepts for today. We're back, Ryan and Graham. It's the Refound Show. Feel like we're stringing them along here. I'm gonna test out a cold open on you, just
Okay,
like a
let's
question to
do
get
it.
the ball rolling. I want to know for you presently, what are you most excited about, and what are you most fearful of? In either
Man,
order.
that's probably the same. Well, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is going to Africa and that whole trip. I feel like that's just going to be a really transformative thing. So I'm really excited about that and all the people, all the organizations I'm going to connect with. And then I would say that that would also fit for like most fearful. For a little while there was like that because there's a lot of stuff going on in that area and a lot of it's just gonna be a really big trip. But I'd say honestly, the thing that part of me is most fearful of is just being more honest and real in this like public setting is way more uncomfortable for me sometimes than going out and doing, some difficult, hard, crazy thing. You know what I mean? I feel way
Yeah.
less like anxiety, like going to like fly in a plane or something like that. Like that's great. But yeah, being more just real, unscripted, not here to, here's a message that I'm here to deliver or something like that, but just being real like this publicly. I'd say that's a pretty big edge for me.
Yeah, we were talking offline uh, about that topic, which I think is a fruitful one. I believe that many people have content creators they like and assume that it's easy or seamless for some people to get in front of the camera, just deliver one perfect take or sit in that vulnerability hoop. My experience is that most people, myself included, and many of the people I've interviewed, talked to, everyone is a human. Everyone is going through some layers of discomfort or, yeah, that kind of self-editing. So it's an important thing to be aware of, I think, and to talk about. We don't really get that in Instagram world where everything is polished and cut to be
Perfect
quickly
little snapshot.
consumed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think in this last week as I was installing wallpaper, and I've had a couple wallpaper videos that have had like 100,000 views. Well, one in particular. But it's so funny because I cut it to be these like just little smash cuts where it just looks like everything happens so fast and so perfect. And in the actual moment of doing, there's, sometimes 45 minutes that goes by of just like trying to solve a problem or, but that's not consumable.
It's the illusion is always more sellable than the messy reality. So yeah, I hear that for sure.
Yeah. Um, and part of the reason why I asked that question in the way that I did, fearful and excitement, is that it's not lost on me that those two sensations are very similar, if not the same, in the body. They just have different positive or negative connotations. But our bodies react the same to excitement and fear. And I think that's pretty wild.
It really is. I feel like the difference in the days versus like when I will usually be my most anxious when I wake up in the morning. And it's like I mean, it feels like, and this is, childhood stuff and everything like that, but it feels like a war vet type thing. Of you just wake up on edge, ready for whatever's going to happen, or your mind's going, something's going to go wrong. Something went wrong. You got to do this. You got to deal with this, whatever it is. And the difference in when I can when I let that run my day or any part of it, or it spins, or I take it seriously, or I take its concern seriously, and then it snowballs into a whole thing, versus the days where I can either really be with it until it subsides, or like channel it into something, is just a massive difference. Because it's a friend of mine was talking to me about that the other day. If she doesn't even like the words, anxiety or fear, these labels, she just views it all as voltage. It's like voltage moving through your body. And it was really, really helpful. We spent a couple hours talking about this kind of thing, but it was really just really enlightening the way that she was viewing those things. Of it's just really it's just about energy, and it's just about learning to move that energy in a different way. Maybe you tell yourself a more positive, more aligned story that helps your mind get on board with what you're doing, but it's really just you moving that energy through. And yeah, I thought it was a pretty cool way to look at that.
Yeah, I've never heard the term voltage applied to it, but
Right?
that's kind of cool
I thought that was
because it
novel.
also
Yeah.
makes me think about how resistance in that case can either shut you down with that voltage, or in my case, it usually spins me into some sort of hyperactivity or
Yeah.
avoidant behavior, or
Hmm.
maybe just running into the fray.
I loved this visual. I actually bought one for myself. I haven't put it together yet though. She had this little Tesla coil and basically turned it up, and so it's spraying, electricity out of it. She basically used that as a metaphor of like, this is your brain with all of that voltage. Unless you direct it, and she, like, you hold your finger up there, and the all that energy organizes itself around that specific point. It
Hmm.
organizes itself to your finger. It's amazing just to see the intelligence in just physics and the way that these structures kind of self-organize. But anyway, it just completely organizes itself around whatever point you give it, and all of a sudden that voltage starts flowing in this very clean or organized way. Anyway, it's a really beautiful metaphor. Really, really stuck with me. I got to put my Tesla coil together.
Be great background fodder. Cool. Well, this is, I guess, officially episode number 2 of the Refound podcast. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the vision, I guess, or the aspirations for a podcast like this. What do we actually want to create with it? I think it started in maybe a different vein for me, at least. It was really coming out of my what I would call like PTSD for being a founder of a tech company and just putting in a huge amount of effort and having a whole life that was constructed on these ideas and situations and people and money, and having that kind of explode and then needing to like literally refound not just another company or another project, but myself in a way. And so that was the seed, I think, from which this sprang. But it's inevitable that in the refounding process, you run into people and ideas and tools, and it kind of collides with a self-help slash new age slash what the hell are we doing here set of existential questions. And I feel like the more that, especially you and I have talked, starting with the specifics of what do we want to do in the world, how are we investing time, energy, resources, that it almost inevitably comes back to some of these more existential questions. So at this point, the idea behind this show, I think, is to bring in people, guests, voices that have some narrative, some moment of accomplishment or creation that led to a shakeup or a flipping of the script. And those stories of refounding ourselves, remembering who we wanted to be when we were kids, or remembering as a species these deeper truths and wisdom sets and teachers and things like that. So yeah, what comes to your mind when you think about this project, your hopes for it?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot lately. I feel like you pointed to it really well of talking about because when we first connected, it was about crypto and investing stuff and a bunch of other entrepreneurship things and things like that. And I think various aspects of that are really important, not just for practical life, but just helping to solve real problems, help provide for people, things like that. But it really does, for me, all come back to that, and especially we've talked about a lot of, spirituality, consciousness stuff. Like it all comes back to, well, who's asking the question? Like who in there is saying, this is what I want to do. This is what's important. How are you deciding what's important? Oh, you want to go out and achieve something. Who is it that wants to achieve that? And what is it that they're wanting? And I feel like so much of, well, I mean, it's kind of like almost like the definition of the, kind of egoic consciousness or whatever you want to talk about that, or however you want to frame that, like the if the person inside who's steering the ship is the conditioned mind and is the voice that's talking in there, it only knows what it knows, and it's trying to solve a feelings problem. I don't feel okay inside, so I got to go get this, or I got to go succeed, or I got to go become somebody, or I got to look away, or whatever it is. And when that thing is allowed to steer the ship, and I've certainly, I mean, experienced this myself many times. Like it makes terrible decisions, and you waste your entire life. And this is like our world is filled with this of trying to solve problems and trying to achieve and trying to get from that place. And so I feel like even before we get into the all of the practical entrepreneurship stuff, which I definitely want to get into, and I want that to be a big part of like the channel and the people we connect with and all kinds of stuff like that, because it's really, really important. We have physical bodies. We physically live here, and it's a manifestation of that unborn energy anyway. But I do think that it's the people that I'm most interested in talking to about that are people that are creating um, very real, beautiful things in the world, but they're doing it from a place of they've already asked and they've already gone to, not just asked, but gone to the deep places inside of themselves of the who am I? What am I? Where did I come from? What am I here to do? And it's that deeper layer, not the conditioned mind, not the voice, whatever it is that's determining what they do, not just more success, more money for the sake of doing it, but there's that deeper, you want to call it the soul, whatever, that deeper intuitive, the layer that artists create from of here's something coming out of the void that wants to be in the world that I want to help bring into the world. Those are the people that I would love to be a part of, just kind of helping create like a little hub. Because I think you've probably found the same thing. I remember like an old Steve Jobs quote where he was basically like the A players only want to play with other A players. Like if you're really like an A player, you really don't want to play with everybody else. It's really not fun for you because other players aren't as dedicated to the same things that you're dedicated to. It's not like a judgment thing. It's just like you want to play with people that are going to push you. And I feel that same way with a lot of the stuff around just um, consciousness and conscious entrepreneurship and all of that. The further I've gone in my own path here, and same thing with connecting more with you and everything like that, is further you go down that path, you only want to connect with people who are also on a similar path, that have similar values, that have similar, and you want to help have each other's backs, and you want to reflect things to each other. You want to kind of build a tribe, because the world's a big, scary, difficult place a lot of the time, and we're tribal beings, and so to me it really is just kind of around how can we maybe be like a little bit of a beacon for maybe weirdos like us, that of just if helping helping people who are interested in these kind of things and those deeper questions to help find each other, and then hopefully create awesome things together that the world needs.
Yeah, well said. What that makes me think of is I selfishly want to almost see myself reflected in or validate that I'm not crazy. Try and find other people that have similar stories. Feel like, and maybe this is more universal. I'm not sure. That's what I want to investigate a little bit. But I feel like for me personally, there is a huge inflection point at about the time of COVID. And that pre-COVID, I feel like the world had a certain sense to it. It had a direction. I could imagine a 10-year future. I could imagine a 15-year future. And then a whole bunch of things happened. I think COVID was a catalyst and a physical limiter of people moving around and interfacing, and a lot of the changes that eventually led to the downfall of my role in my company were planted at the time of COVID. But post COVID, I feel like the fog of war, as it were, is so close to the face that it's hard for me to get back in line with some of the even the business philosophies, the ideas of entrepreneurship, the methods of just getting things done that were really prevalent pre-COVID. And so I'm really wondering how other entrepreneurs, thing starters, creatives, virtualists, just people in general are coping with what to me feels like a very truncated timeline. It's like in the
Hmm.
next 4 years, 2026 to 2030, it feels like there's going to
Hmm.
be huge changes. There already are these huge changes that are happening. So, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I could have sat in a room and talked about, strategic planning and the best way to execute. And now I'm more like, how do you forecast what's going to happen in 3 months, let alone 3 years? So there's this moment, and I'm curious your reflection. Um, how have you how has your view of the future changed, or where you do want to invest time? Or are you different in this kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, or maybe it's
Hmm.
a different set of inflection points for you, but from whatever you came into the entrepreneurial journey with as like a foundational metaphysics or worldview, how has that changed and what have you done to cope with it?
Yeah, man, that's a big question. So COVID was certainly probably the biggest inflection point for me too. I feel like it was the biggest mass awakening event ever. I mean, the
Mm,
whole world stopped. And so that was, my big, waking up moment or whatever was in COVID too. And I was at Google, I was at the height of my career and very much in the machine and focused on all this. Oh, I, finally made it and all this kind of thing. And there was that, without getting into details, there was a really big consciousness moment that I had never experienced before that I'd read about, but I thought people were making it up. And and it just I saw myself, life, everything in just a completely different way. And once you have those kind of moments, I feel the same way that you did a minute ago of just I can't go back. There's no way that I can take this not just this new perspective, this new awareness, whatever it is, and especially since it's been substantiated, since then with countless other things past that point, I can't go back. I can't just pretend that I don't um, that I haven't seen or experienced certain things. And so then it's kind of into the scary unknown of like, oh, well, what the hell do I do now? Of what do now it's a much bigger, deeper, scarier question of like, okay, what do I want to dedicate my life to? What really matters to invest my time and effort in? And that's a way tougher question than just like, oh, I want to be, career successful, whatever it is. And anyway, so there was that. And I remember during COVID, from a practical standpoint, because it changed my whole investment approach and everything too, because I saw just how the 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 actions that the Federal Reserve took of just they gave the whole game away. And it really clarified a lot of things to me around how certain mechanisms there worked. And I remember all these things kind of happening simultaneously for me, the consciousness stuff and life stuff, these big existential questions, investment stuff, and all these kind of things like that. And I just kept having this voice that it felt like a much wiser voice than me in the back of my mind that was basically kept repeating. And it was just pointing to nature and the mechanism of evolution. It was just saying it's not the smartest, it's not the fastest, it's not the strongest that survive. It's the most adaptable to change. That's your job. to be as adaptable to change as you can. It's not about maximizing your stats on any of these other things. You want to survive, you want to do well, you want to whatever it is, you want to be able to adapt to what happens. Get on board. Get on board with what's happening. Go with what's happening. And yeah, adapt to that. Do make the difficult decisions, do whatever you need to do in order to within yourself in order to be able to um, deal with what life's throwing at you. And anyway, so those are probably the those were some of the
I'm
biggest, I
so
guess,
curious,
broadly
what were
speaking.
those?
Yeah.
Yeah, what were those adaptations?
Oh, man, so many, often very painfully, painfully learned. I feel like the biggest, and I'm way better at this than I used to be, but I still suck at it compared to where I want to be. But really being in tune with what's actually happening versus what I want to have happen. And I've always felt this way. The further I got in the business world and the tech world and all the Silicon Valley stuff and everything like that, and with investment stuff too, I would I would always kind of get this sensation of like, oh, the really smart thing to do to win this deal, to investment wise or whatever it is actually super obvious. It's actually really, really obvious if you just look at what's actually going on. Not your layers of, I need to make money for this. I want to be successful because of this. What's this person going to think of me? What do I want to have happen? What does my framework say is supposed to happen? What do I think? If I just throw all that away and I just look at it, just truly look at it, then oftentimes the answer is obvious. And it's not coming from the thinking logical part of the mind most of the time. It's just coming from a much more intuitive, just very, very obvious standpoint. It's almost like, I don't know, the first metaphor that comes to mind is like you watch an object, you just glance over at an object that's like teetering on the edge. Teetering on the edge of falling off. You don't need your logical mind to go, I think the calculations, but you just look at it and go, it's probably about to fall, isn't it? Like that, just really, really obvious feeling things. And so every time that I feel like I'm doing this well, I will watch my mind then start to try to extrapolate what it expects to happen or what it wants to happen is as a sense of control and safety, right? Because if it, because truly being in that space of not knowing, at least at first, is like really scary. The mind hates it. It hates it. Of what you mean, I'm just going to be here and react to whatever happens. Well, I have no idea what's going to happen. And these really bad things could happen, and it'll get really, really scared. But whenever I've been able to do that, it's like a superpower, man. I make completely different decisions. It's not an intelligence thing. It's not even like a competence or capability thing. It's just like a wisdom thing, and wisdom in the sense of really obvious wisdom. You know what I mean? And kind of like when everybody's max euphoria, max bullish, you should probably be concerned. And when everybody's max bearish and everybody thinks the world's falling apart and things can't get any worse, it's probably a good time to look for opportunity. You know what I mean? Just like it doesn't take a genius to do that, but it does. It takes a lot of awareness and discipline inside to be able to actually do that in the moment and to see, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like who's running your life? Like, is it the voice in my head, which runs, I catch that thing all the time. Is that running my life? Or is me just being completely present and looking what's happening in front of me and trying to make the best decision that I can with what information I have? Just that is such a superpower. It's amazing.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit. This idea that we have a higher self or a subconscious self or a part of our consciousness or maybe all of our consciousness that is not being generated from inside our heads, but is actually a wider field of knowledge that can be tapped into, and that our brains and our thinking is actually a limiting effect
Hmm.
that is condensing all of this information that's available to us into these strings of words and these stories and ideas. That plays interestingly with the concept of manifesting. And it's this kind of duality that I've been playing with a bit. I'm curious your take on it. On I'd say there's one school of thought that is about law of attraction, or even Joe Dispenza kind of touches on this. Like if you spend your time thinking these garbage thoughts, you're gonna have a garbage existence because our thoughts come from our beliefs and they turn into actions, and then our whole world kind of aligns around. And I even see this a lot with drivers and like road rage. I see these people that are like flying around, tailgating and just having. There's this guy, quick story, like pulling into the studio a day or two ago, and he was so far up my ass that like, and I'm a generally a pretty pleasant guy, but I was just like, man, I have to mess with this guy. Like he is just so outrageously. So I slowed down, like I actually moved to frustrate him further. And in his world, he's like, man, everyone's a bad driver. Everyone's like so slow or in my way. But it was really apparent to me that it was his energy that was creating around him a situation where people were resistant to him, and then he felt resistance. Little sidetrack, but that kind of where our attention goes, energy flows. And so that, in a way, is different from what you were talking about. And I know that you're talking more about making investments and seeing a clear picture versus a story that you've convinced yourself of. But it does run into this interesting question of is is it more fortuitous or comfortable or um, a better path, whatever that means to you, to inside manifest what you want and say those affirmations and visualize the future that you want to inhabit and embody that, and then the universe will create it? Or is it the kind of adaptability of saying, I'm here, tell a story with me?
Mhm.
And whatever unfolds, it might be completely out of left field, it might be this, that, or the other. Those two have this strange orbit, and in different circles or at different times, they make more or less sense. But it's a really big question that I think taps on a deeper philosophical question. I'm curious your take on that.
Man, I think it's an awesome question. I've struggled with that a lot too. I still struggle with this, and I will probably think something different about it in a month versus right now. But man, so when I this was actually one of the things you and I didn't talk about, but like when I was down meeting Michael Singer at the Temple of the Universe, this was one of the things he actually talked about, and it was around the law of attraction and manifesting versus essentially surrendering to that flow of life and letting it direct. And I thought it was really interesting because he gets asked about this all the time, right? And he's 1,000 times more wiser being than I am, and
Let's get you off of here. Let's get
it's get me
where's
out of here.
Mickey?
Get
Cue
Michael Singer
Mickey.
in here, man. Like just let's all go listen to him. And but he was talking about basically that the law of attraction thing. And does it exist? Of course, of course it exists. I think we've all experienced in one way or another, whether it's manifesting something positive or something negative. Whenever I've different times I've tapped into that, there's been weird things where I've put an idea in my head, or I've, usually when I've felt something, I've really felt the desire around, oh, this would actually be really good for me to do. I don't necessarily want to do it, but this might be really good to do. And then all of a sudden, life realigns itself in this magical way. And whether that's, you know, massive cosmic laws, or whether that's the, reticulating activating system in the brain that's it's scanning for whatever you want, or all those things combined, there's definitely something to it. And he was basically talking about that versus of like, yes, of course that's real. Nothing wrong with that. Knock yourself out if you want to do that. But also, where are you creating from? Like, what are those desires coming from? And basically saying for most people, and you could maybe argue that this is, uh, I don't know, maybe everybody to a degree, but that a lot of times those desires, the things we want to manifest, are a result of our experiences. We've experienced, pain, so we want to manifest pleasure. We've experienced being in danger, not being safe, so we want to manifest safety. We experience lack, so we want to manifest abundance, whatever it is, and things like that. And not that there's anything wrong with that. And in fact, I'm actually actively trying to improve my skills in that area of like, how can I really consciously create more? You talk about like the Joe Dispenza stuff. Man, that guy's unbelievable in terms of the stories that are just around. Even you just walk around, go to a retreat, we go to one of their retreats and talk to people there. The craziest
Mm.
stories, and I mean, like unbelievable, and not just like healing diseases and things like that, but just creating things in their lives that are, results of that work. So anyway, that's an active curiosity for me, and actively something I'm working to um, do more of. But there is also that the flip side of that of, would I be better off? Would, a given person be better off truly surrendering to that flow of life, not surrendering in like the apathetic sense, or like the no, I'm not going to go create something amazing or whatever, but surrendering in the sense of, I'm going to fully show up, and I'm going to fully listen to life, and whenever life opens those doors, I'm going to take that door with the fullest of my conviction, my effort, my will, all of that, and I'm going to see where those things go. And not just Michael, but another teacher of mine who's just an absolutely brilliant, brilliant woman. I was talking with her a few weeks ago, and she used to be a huge manifester, huge, like would like revel in the things that she could create in her life. Oh, I'm going to go do this crazy thing. I'm going to go do this business thing, or fitness competitor, or whatever it was. And basically, she said that once she stopped chasing her own desires and started just fully surrendering to what life had in store for her, what life had planned, she said it was so much better. And she was amazing at manifesting stuff. She was amazing at creating. And she said that's surrendering to the things that basically that was life's will over hers, that opened up even more for her than
What's her
her
name?
creation
This
ever
is a
did.
great guest idea.
It's yeah, I'll talk with you after I'll talk with you after this.
Yeah, because that is so curious to me. And I heard a couple years ago, forget the name of the woman who was channeling a council of beings. My friend sent me this recording, and this is kind of early in my exposure to any of this kind of like mediumship, that kind of, Bashar, that kind of stuff. But this woman was sharing this wisdom about the different dimensions, and it stuck with me that like the third dimension is this place of material and scarcity and planning, and a lot of people, businesses, things like that. I think the textbooks have been written from the third dimension, this kind of material space. And then the fourth dimension was this recognition that our consciousness was generating, attracting, producing the field of happening that we were in. And so the fourth dimensional trick is how to attract the things you want, and how to be in this constant state of change to
Hmm.
kind of maneuver and navigate and have these things that you want actually materialize. But then the fifth dimension was like a step beyond that, which is realizing that if you're stuck in the fourth dimension of generating, manifesting all the time, you're missing this deeper secret that it's all coming to you anyway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's basically the same thing you just said in different words. And, you know, just as a conscious being, or maybe an analytical being, the delineation between when I'm in the third dimension or when I'm in the fourth dimension or when I'm in the fifth dimension, and what those actually mean and what they relate to as far as like feelings or data, that it all kind of seems to be, in some sense, this soup of chaotic happening that goes well sometimes, poorly other times, and then on a long enough timeline, there is no bad or good. It's just where you're at. That actually segues into another little topic that has been high attention for me lately, because I have been in the midst of a surrender experiment. We talked about this a little bit in the first episode that we did, literally stemming from reading the surrender experiment. And in this whole story, post company that I was running, and then rebuilding my identity after that as an artist, and wanting to work with high functioning entrepreneurs and other founders, and spending a lot of time and just giving a lot of energy to help other people find clarity and see a path. And it was kind of like, the difference between being a parent and a grandparent. Like as a parent, as an entrepreneur myself and a business runner, like I had my own baby that needed constant care and attention and protection and all this stuff. And then kind of being this consultant was like being a grandparent, where you come in, you get to play with the kid, get to learn a bunch, you get to kind of help out, maybe buy some new shoes or whatever, but then you're out. And it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. And so that's the path I thought I was going to go down, is like,
Hmm.
okay, I've been a C-level person for 10 years and I've done all these things. But the surrender was like, am I really, is that really what I'm going to continue doing? I don't know. I kind of let go. And then the universe brought me this very strange opportunity to be an apprentice learning a trade. And my days now are so resistance free. I have a morning routine. I wake up, I meditate, have different kind of things that I do to just kind of prepare myself and get in coherence. But then I go out in the world and I'm being told what to do by a master. And I'm in a place where I'm not the expert. I just have to like, it happens quite often. I have to be very humble and not argue or try and explain my thinking, but just like really make myself a vessel for this information that's being gifted to me. And as a result, I've found that the last, 3 or 4 months, I've had this bizarre, I call it transparency. Like I feel more transparent, more in the flow of the river.
Hmm.
And a lot of times I'm going into these very fancy spaces, these, very wealthy people's homes, and there's nothing more invisible than the person who shows up to, paint primer on a wall or like put wallpaper in the bathroom. And so I'm just like this disconnected fly on the wall. And on the one hand, it's beautiful. It's such an enjoyable experience. It, it has a lot less sexiness or novelty than thinking of myself as like a high zoot business coach or whatever. And so there's that kind of wrestling with, am I settling? Am I just disappearing? Am I just going to see 10 years of my life disappear again in people's bathrooms and, putting up wallpaper? So yeah, I guess I'm just sharing that as a story of a firsthand experimentation with this, because when I surrendered and said yes to these things that were unfolding or coming to me, in a way, I see how maybe a higher self or some intuitive part of me that I'm not consciously aware was like, oh, here's a great place for you to spend countless hours, nose to nose with these very detail oriented tasks and just being lost in that. And there's this kind of periodic resistance to that of like, what am I doing with my life? Is this really, am I going to like go buy a van and ladders and this is like my business now? And how does that compare to my vision of myself? And I don't know, that's kind of almost even more secondary to this aspect that I wanted to bring up. Again, I guess it's just another reflection on it. It's the control versus the allowing, and it's the ability for myself to get out of my own way, to let these really wonderful gifts flow that are coming in packages that are just shaped entirely different than I ever would have expected. I
Hmm.
told myself, my 20-year-old self, like, yeah, when you're 43, you're going to be hanging wallpaper in rich people's bathrooms. I'd be like, what? Get me the fuck out of here. Like, what has gone wrong? And I guess a lot of things have gone wrong, breaking off of that timeline A to timeline whatever we're on now.
Hmm.
So, yeah, more of an anecdote than any kind of question, but it's present and kind of my daily meditation.
Well, I know I've said this. I said this the last time you and I were talking about this privately, but I'll just say it here publicly too. Like the first thing that I thought about was the book Siddhartha, and the at the end of that book, after chasing enlightenment and meeting the Buddha and all these practices and him, all these things, when he finally like not like gives up, but he kind of lets go and he ends up being the apprentice of the ferryman at the river, and that's where he actually finds himself and finds enlightenment and finds real peace. And it's literally just ferrying people back and forth. It's chop wood and carry water, chop wood and carry water. That's it's so funny to me. Like even idea of a lot of the ideals around enlightenment and spirituality and all these kind of things. And I've been so guilty of this myself because, especially with certain experiences, your mind just latches onto it. It's just that was the most incredible thing I've ever experienced. I just want to live there. I want that again. I want that again. It's like a drug. Or this fascination with how absolutely enormously infinitesimally complex the universe and it is, and whatever other dimensions we're connected to that we can every once in a while touch a little, but not really live there. Anyway, but that at least my understanding of real enlightenment of what we're all really trying to do with that whole practice is to just get here, to get fully and completely here. Like the Zen masters, will say after, attaining what's already here, they'll say there's nothing to seek and there's nothing to find because it's right here. That's why they have their monks do, 8 hours a day of just labor to just get your mind out of the way and just get with your body and get with what's actually happening. And so anyway, I don't know, there might be Ryan 10 years down the road might look back and go like, man, that was the most enlightening possible thing that I could have done. That was, maybe that,
I
you know,
guess, yeah, the funny thing is
like
is it's like never what you expect, or it's not what I
never.
expect, right?
Yeah,
Like,
never.
because you and I have shared this quest for novelty, I would call it, or
Yeah,
if there's a door, I'm gonna go through it.
yeah.
And I've been in all kinds of, psychedelic spaces and meditative spaces and just extreme experiences that I've put myself in. And man, there's like an amplitude to life in those spaces that is sometimes terrifying, sometimes blissed out, but very pronounced. And what I'm experiencing right now is like everything is so even keel that it's almost scary in that way. Like, and even as like a small example, like my meditation, it's taken me years to actually get to have a solid meditation practice because in the past my brain was just so active, my body was so active, I couldn't just sit, for 15, 20, 30 an hour. And now it's like I can tell that a good meditation, quote unquote, is one where I am able to kind of like step back from that noise, the voice, the thoughts, and kind of get to this awareness that's like natural awareness that everything is
Hmm.
contained in. However, when I get to that, it's like there is no resistance. So there's very little experience, there's very little memory, there's very little klesha or attachment.
Hmm.
And so it's just like, oh, now it's this time. And like that part of my life is lost. And it's like if you were to really just like have enlightenment in this moment, I feel like you would also just die because it seems like life is all of the resistance to it happening that creates the drama and the excitement and the so it's almost like be careful what you wish for because I love you told me the Siddhartha thing and I've read that book a couple times over the years and also really I think was affected by that ending. And it's like if you really are choosing, and maybe there's different parts of you that choose, like the ego really wants to have the big hero's journey
Yeah, yeah, it does.
and is very scared of just disappearing quietly into nothing. And it also touches on another, uh, thing that I bring up from time to time with myself and others, but the idea of like a bodhisattva versus a pratyeka Buddha. I think we also talked about this
Hmm.
a couple times, but like I've liked that the Chinese and Zen and Taoist kind of view of a really enlightened person is more like a beggar in the street. And the fat Buddha with the sack over his shoulder, people call him the Buddha, but he's just a bodhisattva, and he was a particular guy who I think Chuanza or someone talks about, who just goes around collecting trash and giving it to little kids, and he's just this kind of like homeless guy, but in this way of thinking, he's a bodhisattva, very few worldly attachments, just joyous, is drinking and, just being human. And that image as a more desirable thing to be than the Pratyeka Buddha, the private Buddha who goes out into the woods and
Yeah.
has some huge experience and then, goes up in a fiery embrace with the divine or whatever,
Yeah.
is almost a selfish and less
Hmm.
desirable thing to be. And I don't know, I think I bring it up just because it is a curious conundrum. I think a lot of our audience will be kind of at this nexus between the doing and the receiving. And it gets into all of these funny questions about, is this path that might feel spiritual really leading us to this transparency? And can we deal with that? Can we cope with that? One more little thing that I thought of while you were sharing is that I have a friend who is a financial advisor. I'd actually love to have her on the show. She went through some really traumatic and interesting experiences last year with a medicine journey that went wrong and kind of
Wow.
opened her in ways that she just was not expecting. It took months, like maybe the whole year, for her to kind of get zipped back up. And even at that, she's a
Wow.
very different creature. Like there's all kinds of colorful plumage that's coming out of that zipper that won't quite fit back in. But she shared some of these realizations that she was having as she like kind of crashed in and out of this cosmic consciousness, like without even intending, these kind of like flashbacks were happening for her. But she was making this point that a lot of what we focus on when we talk about money and manifesting and business and um, even spirituality is coming from these higher chakras. They're coming from like this heart and the desire. They're coming from this voice and this like wanting to be heard and to be present and even this third eye and being able to envision the future. But her realization was that she was so existing here, but her lower chakras, the actual root chakra and the, second chakra were so neglected, so out of balance that even this was her perception of people with money, like you can attain everything from up here, but with those three out of balance, it creates, everything from schizophrenia to self sabotage to, all of these different things, especially like that sexual center and that
Yeah.
ability to receive and that like generative power, if that's cut off and we're manifesting from up here. That's another little
Hmm.
side spur of the conversation. I'll kick it over to you to go down whatever path spoke to you.
Man, yeah, I feel like there's three or four different threads there. The the trying to escape by going up. So one of the most interesting and like biggest things that has been such a thing that's tripped me up over and over, and I'm sure I will look back at this moment and see 10 other ways that it's doing it to me now, but that ego structure, the shapeshifter, the person inside, it loves spirituality. It actually kind of loves the like awakening in a way because then it starts latching onto that. And it like whatever happens, it wants to create an identity around it. And I remember my first few like really big experiences and things like that, and that ego would just get so excited and it would feel special. It would feel like, oh, it was awakening. Oh, it was, almost like it was leveling up, right? And all these different things. And it took me a while of going through that to even realize that that's what was happening. I thought it was me that was excited, that was like all excited about this or whatever it was, and then wanting to understand what things mean, right? And wanting to make a story and understand the structure and understand this, and it was still, and it was like watching. I remember at one point it was I wrote, I'm not like a poet by any means, but I just like sat down and started writing. And at the end I was like, wow, that's kind of like that's the most poetic thing I've ever written. That was actually like kind of beautiful. And it was just basically around that structure and how it just sought control and safety in my worldly life and in my physical life. That was everything that I was trying to get with all the success was the ability to keep myself and the people that I loved safe. This traumatized kid uh, trying to figure out just how to be okay. And then after, kind of spiritual awakening process, well, it just did the same thing. It just did the exact same thing. It was just clinging to all these things of, oh, I've got to be able to get to whatever deep state at will so that whenever life really hits me with a brick, because I've been
Mm.
hit with a brick, but multiple times in my life, and it really sucks, and it's never in the way that you expect. And there's no real way to fully prepare for it, right? You can prepare for these 8 billion things, and a brick will come from the other way. And then realizing that it was attaching to ideals within spirituality of, oh, if I can go to these really deep states of consciousness or whatever it is, or if I can detach from my human and not care what happens to him, and then I can be okay. And it was just the same process in different clothes. It was really painful, right? Because it's kind of like that realizing there's no escape from this. You know what I mean? Like they're what's happening, we're integrally a part of. It is us in a sense. You know what I mean? Like it is, we're in the illusion state and everything like that, but there's no way to extract yourself from that in a way where you're separate, because ultimately there is no separation, right? And the separation itself is the illusion that's causing all your suffering. And so anyway, it's just this really, I still struggle with it. It's like this weird little mind flip thing, and of spirituality being the thing that's keeping you from enlightenment. It's wild. And and I think about, if you've ever read Adyashanti. You familiar with him? He to me is like, I don't know, like one of the gold standard teachers. There's teachers, and then there's like, masters. When you just hear him speak, you hear where he is speaking from, and that it's the place that some of us might be able to touch every once in a while, or like a great teacher might live in half the time. I feel like he lives there pretty much all the time, right? It's incredible. But the book, The End of Your World, which is an amazing book, you would love it, by the way. And he goes through the mechanics around the process of awakening, and then the common traps that happen of you experience awakening, and then here's what the ego tends to do, and then goes through the process of how you can essentially be awakened 1 second, and then you believe a thought, you get pulled into a thing, and you're asleep again in the next one, and then you're awake, and you pop up, and it kind of creates this really, kind of like bipolar existence in a way. I've certainly experienced that many times. It's very jarring for the person plus the people around you, of being so calm and clear and wise and loving in one moment, and then getting pulled back into your shit
Yeah.
and the things that are not clear, and all of a sudden you're the worst person on earth in the next moment. And so anyway, yeah, I feel like that's really, really real. And I feel like there was something else connected to that. Um, oh, the lower chakras thing, that you mentioned, because I feel like that ties into a lot of that same tendency of like wanting, again, our ideals. So it even goes back to the investment stuff earlier. Like what's actually happening, versus like what do you want to have happen? What are your ideals, where you're trying to tell life what to do, or you're trying to tell, awakening how to happen, or whatever it is. And that there's no way to escape the being human process. You're here. It's a process. You're, for however you signed up for this, you're here. And the only way out is through. So whatever is stored in those lower energy centers. And for most people, the struggles are food, sex, and money, the biggest things we all cling to. Whatever those attachments of either one or any one of those three that makes me feel safe, makes me feel loved, makes me feel important, makes me feel whatever it is, if that isn't really worked through, and all of that is trench work. It is not like high deep meditation, beautiful. That is deep, painful, embarrassing trench work, in terms of all that, very, very humbling, all the different ways that we cope because we feel like we're too much or we're not enough. And anyway, but that there's truly no way to bypass that. And I know, and I I think of maybe one or two people that I've known in particular that have had very deep spiritual experience, have dedicated huge parts of their life, massive amounts of energy, but they won't open those doors. They think that they don't have them, right? They think that they've processed them, and it creates this really, it's almost like the hoisted by your own petard thing. You know what I mean? Like you're caught in this trap. And anyway, it just creates a really interesting, very dangerous psyches to me, whenever somebody is, especially if they've developed a lot in these other ways, but they won't look at the shadow, right? And yeah, it creates all kinds of all kinds of havoc.
I'm seeing a fusion now between these two modalities. We're talking spiritual, but we're also talking doers, creators, yeah, business, investment, all that kind of stuff. And the duality is that, or I guess actually the intersection is, in a way, it relates to our being cut off from tradition, I guess.
Hmm.
When you were talking about that teacher, one of the things that was apparent to me is that in my early spiritual awakenings or big experiences, things that I was having, I felt so isolated. I had no one to talk to, and I was looking. I was trying to find people. I went to Buddhist temples, and I went to, talk to homeless people, just like everybody that I could. Like,
Hmm.
what is this experience? And without any kind of support, it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm the first person to like have this awakening and I need to share it with everybody. But then what happens is, because it's such an isolated experience and those personal symbols become so meaningful, and I think this is where the overlap is for like a successful business person who has done things a very particular way, or um, has a very rigid set of ideals that have worked so far, that what I found is when I would hear someone else speak, I would shut down very quickly if it threatened my views at all. Even if it was like very like out there, people like myself, I guess, were the most threatening, because it's like, oh, but I'm the special one. I'm the one who had this
Hmm.
experience, and like, oh, I don't want to hear about your experience because if it's different, then I'm gonna have to integrate that. And so that gets back to where I kind of started, like the lack of a real, I would say tradition, but it's almost the supporting structures for us as humans to have these types of experiences, where I do believe that in the past, in different cultures, there was a
Hmm.
whole framework of rites of passage, and there was a group of elders that had been through this and had been out in the forest and had, it wasn't about like, well, they had this really high attainment, so it's like worship them. It's like they were there to support the young people and going out and doing their own version of that. And it all kind of integrated into one symbol system. And so I just see that. I don't really have anything to do with it other than to acknowledge that it seems like as a Western psyche, we have been, and I will say intentionally, disconnected from our own
Hmm.
lineage, from our
Hmm.
own symbol set, from our own connection with nature. One of the things that is really beautiful in our family in the last couple of years is that my partner, Kayla, has been very into this kind of female empowerment awakening, which is very connected to the wheel of the year and the seasons and all of these different energy flows. And that tradition, was there for our ancestors up until the point that it was chopped off and we were given this kind of monolithic symbol set. So I think part of the challenge right now is to, yes, like look forward, find these new novel and expansive fifth dimensional
Hmm.
experiences, and put them into a container of sorts that is um, tapped into our roots. Again, it's just like you were saying, the trying to escape by going up. I feel like there's these deep roots here that involve the earth, that involve the water and the soil and the seasons and our own balance with nature. And as a young person, I know, I deeply believe that I would have had a very different feeling of myself and my place in the universe if I could have these experiences within a culture that at least was permissive, or,
Hmm.
I mean, if not encouraging, at least allowing for the fact that more information could be coming in through each new generation. So I guess when I look to what's happening now and all the unraveling, politically, economically, culturally, interpersonally, the the faith that I have is that as humans, we go through these crisis moments, And again, that could be personal, it could be collectively. I think if we are able to surrender, I guess, tying everything together here, it's not just this escape out into novel concepts that are going to save us. And it's not just this collapse down into the
Mhm.
trenches of, yeah, food, sex, money, a kind of a holistic allowing of those forces to sublimate and integrate. There's a huge body of wisdom that has been here and is in our cells and is in the earth and in our surroundings. And I guess that's yeah, I never really had made that connection until now, but I've always kind of put my philosophical or experiential concepts in these like, cloud palaces that I've experienced,
Mhm.
and then these more emotional or peak experiences, even, flashbulb
Mhm.
memories of shit getting real. That feels a lot more like grounded and guttural and animalistic. Yeah.
Man, I resonated with that a lot. Man, where to even begin on that? I feel like with the the lack of initiation thing, I think is huge. I think it's one of the biggest reasons why so much of the West and specifically in the US, we have all these and so I think it's specifically harmful for men. We don't have these rites of passage really for men or women in most cases, but it's specifically harmful for men because men are the ones with most of the guns and most of the power. And so you end up very clearly with boy consciousness, not as like a
Mm.
pejorative term, but just literally like boy consciousness with the in the body with the resources and the weapons, the power of adult men that are supposed to be, that one of the highest functions of that, divine masculine is to be able to protect and to it has the strength so that it can protect those that don't. And that's a really noble, beautiful thing. And when that is not, but it's really easy to have that power, even for somebody who's well intentioned, and be really destructive with it. Really, really destructive with it. I mean, most revolutionaries, most of the rebels that seize power, they end up becoming the despots, right? It's very very similar thing. And I feel like that lack of initiation is just it's so difficult. And even just speaking for man, I mean, I know you and I've gone through similar things of like it's almost like you have to self-initiate yourself because you don't have that structure. And so you can seek it out. You could find, certain men's groups, you can find elders, you find mentors, you find all this kind of thing like that. But it's not the same thing as like if you're growing up in a society or community where it's you're kind of being led through that and you're able to kind of trust that process. You're having to kind of take a lot more initiative and then trust trust your own initiative in a way, but you're really having to take a lot more ownership of oh, there needs to not only do I need to work through and integrate these pieces and all of this real deep, vulnerable, painful work that most of the time kind of has to be done with people or in front of people. Like I don't know anybody who's been able to really develop themselves to a very high level just by themselves. And the people I know who have tried, and I mean really tried, it does that squirrely thing I was talking about earlier, where you get, you've experienced all these really high states, so you think you're enlightened, and but you haven't dealt with your, lower chakra stuff that's stuck in there. And so you basically end up with an ego that believes that it's God, which is like the. That's such a tricky thing, even for that person to get out of eventually. You know what I mean? That's a tough one. I remember Adyashanti talking about, he said when he meets people like that or they come to him, he's like, there's almost nothing, it's like it's one of the trickiest things, almost nothing I can do because they're convinced of something. Anyway, so I feel like that kind of initiation and the self-initiation, things like that are in lieu of real initiation. The self-initiation being very, very important. And then, oh, with the us being kind of intentionally separated from wisdom, from ancestors and cultures and those who have been to these deep states. I remember early in my awakening how angry I was because I was what, this was COVID, so I was like, I don't know, 28, 29, something like that. How angry I was that this had all been kept from me. And for of just I've spent, 20, 20 plus years, 28 years of my life, and for me specifically, ages 8 to mid 20s were just miserable, and or 8 to 18 especially. And just in this miserable set of suffering loops, believing I was my mind, believing that, or to some degree believing that, and being stuck in these models of consciousness in the universe that just make you feel completely isolated, alone. You take everything on yourself because there's no larger intelligence in these kind of views, or the intelligence that's sold to you is like an old white man in the clouds, deciding things like that, which is absurd. And so anyway, I remember, going back and reading, the Upanishads and Sutras of Patanjali and things like that, and old Buddhist texts and things like that as well, and just being like, these people figured this out, figured they figured the whole game out 6,000 years ago. Like the main themes of what consciousness is doing, the patterns that evolve, the layers of the process. For anybody who hasn't read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it's just like it's wild to read through the basically what happens as consciousness develops, as it becomes more aware of itself, as it grows and expands, and the abilities that develop within said consciousness that are very common among, healers and things like that, that are all just normal aspects of being a human, of normal aspects of existence that we've been completely cut off from. And it's just, and when you're cut off from that, your experience of life can't be anything other than suffering, really, because you're this isolated little separate ego. And so it's just, and I feel like that whole complex serves um, serves a lot of, or it serves a lot of money in our culture to a very small amount of people that are selling drugs and consumerism things and whatever outside thing is going to make you feel whole inside when um and I believe that there are many people doing that are quite awake and know exactly what they're doing, and it's just selling you sugar pills with the promise that this is going to do something for you when it not only doesn't, but it makes it worse. And it's just anyway, yeah, I still have bits in me that are so angry about that, not just for myself and things like that, but when I see, people that I love, people that I care about, that maybe won't even look into these deeper things because they're scared, because their ego is scared, because they've been so programmed in a certain way. It's I don't know. It's something some work for me to do there around that anger, but I resonate with that a lot.
What that's making me think of now is this moment of a little epiphany that I had once, thinking about this question of who are we really, and are we really individuals, or are we this universal consciousness that's arising in all of these different forms, and it's really hard for me to know whether the person that I appear to be is actually something that is unique to the ego or the identity, or if it's very much a product of the surroundings.
Hmm.
I had an experience once where I was in Las Vegas for a trade show, and coming from Fort Collins, and this was like early in our business, so I thought I was this enlightened, young entrepreneur coming from my garden to spread the gospel of crowdfunding at the time. And I was in Las Vegas for 3 days and I lost my soul. And I was concerned about how I was dressed. I was concerned about what people thought of me. I was wanting better clothes so I could be taken seriously. I was just like playing that game so quickly that I was like, holy shit, I was born in Las Vegas, in that circle, in those circles, like that's who I would be. Like it has very little to do with my opinions. Anyway, my point in bringing this up is when I think about that concept that there are an enlightened few, or not even enlightened, but there's a few that are making these massive decisions that are preferentially benefiting themselves. And I was watching some little reel on Instagram about Emperor Constantine and the whole formation of the the first real
The
Bible
canon, yeah.
that was put into circulation. And I think about, man, if that person could just be removed from history, like what would have happened? And you could do that with anybody. You could do that with an Adolf Hitler, you could do that with a Trump, you can do that
Hmm.
with a Gandhi. And the question is, are those really these unique individuals with all of this hero's journey juice, or are the right people created by the situations, almost like a crystallization out of the bigger field of happening? And the epiphany moment that I had was looking at a tree and seeing the cells of the tree, trillions and trillions of tree or cells. And there was a branch that was, big and heavy, and all of the bark underneath that joint was thick and calloused and just like under all of this strain. And then up higher, it's the fresh little growth, and it's these leaves that are dancing in the sun. And it's like, I wonder if the leaves up there, like, man, that callous trunk just needs to be more free and release all that tension and be calmer and go with the breeze. And then the trunk cells are like, how much weight is being held up here, like I have to be rigid, I have to be stubborn,
Yeah.
I have to, like there's no other choice. So anyway, my question, my meditation sometimes is like, what is that worldview that that upper 1% sees, and how are they not doing almost exactly what you're describing, of like, when you look at the situation, it's actually very simple. When you get rid of all the preferences of how you'd want it to be or not, really it boils down to, maybe tough decisions or whatever. I feel like there's this forgiveness in my heart moments of the people that are in that, top of the pyramid, because I don't know that if I was there, I would be doing anything else. I don't know what the information is. I don't know what the stakes are. I don't know what the landscape looks like. And so I have to just trust that it's all part of this human happening. It's a really circular way to get to this, if there's a nugget here or a meditation, it's, why is it that we tend to think that we can change ourselves, trust ourselves, affect the function of things? How can we hold that and at the same time feel that other people lack that faculty or are doing it wrong, or I don't know, because it all kind of collapses back into the same question. We're talking about all of the uncertainties of, or just like being in that uncertainty, regardless of the situation. And I would say that extends to who you are moment to moment and the things that unfold for you. It also extends to every consciousness presently aware of and part of this happening. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know if any of what I just said makes sense.
It, man, it does. I feel like, yeah, we could talk about that topic for an hour because that's a really, really tricky one and something that I really struggle with a
You have
lot.
30
Like
seconds because we're
30
at
seconds, let's
no.
wrap it all up. But I guess like without getting crazy in detail, like there's parts of that that philosophically I totally get, and then parts of that that I really, really struggle with. Like the understanding that, at least in my experience, that ego structure works a lot more like physics than anything else. It thinks the way it does what it does, it wants what it does because of what it's experienced, right? Period. Like if you see, so that's why people who are really in ego consciousness are really easy to manipulate because you can just see it's just like I don't know, it's just like physics, it's like a pool of water. If I slap on this side, the water's going to move over here. If I do this, they're really, really easy. If you get people in fear, it's really, really easy to manipulate them because they're full in their ego. And so it's what, half of marketing and propaganda and everything like that. It assumes that you can get people, or they're already in their ego consciousness. So I think there's a ton of forgiveness in that. I think of, the stories of Jesus being nailed to the cross and looking at the, person, doing, the nailing, and basically just kind of looking with complete compassion of forgive them for they know not what they do, right? Like they don't know. It's the ego doing this thing because this person's only nailing me because they were told to do it by their superior, and if they don't do it, they're going to be on the cross next to me, and they're, you know what I mean? Like all these things. So there's stuff like that I have a ton of empathy for, but I do really struggle with some of the things around um, the forgiveness and understanding for maybe forgiveness in a higher sense, but at a human level, I will really struggle with, the Sackler family, addicting half the country to opioids, knowing exactly what they were doing. There's certainly layers of that I'm sure if you look through, their upbringings and, boohoo, super rich, it's a lot easier to not feel, not feel too bad for, oh, I'm sure a lot of pressure was put on you as a spoiled little rich kid. Even though that's probably true, and they were probably miserable in a lot of ways and felt like they were never enough and all these kind of things like that. But I do really struggle with that sometimes, especially with the decisions that are being made. I understand, um, I understand, like looking at leaders that I've had respect for that made really difficult decisions. I had a lot of respect for, have a lot of respect for like a Teddy Roosevelt, somebody like that. Imperfect, like very much very human, but there's a deeper layer of it's like the soul is awake and it is trying to do its best, and it's the man in the arena, right, who strives, who fails, who errs, but gets back up and keeps going. And then I feel like there are genuinely people that are somewhat awake or maybe very awake to what's going on, and they use that from a place of evil, if we can use that word, right? Like that are using that are knowing exactly what they're doing, are more awakened to say the truth of that oneness, and are using that knowledge against the ones that are not aware of that. And that's something that I'm sure the highest perspective is forgiveness and understanding, but I really do struggle with that one. I struggle with that a lot because I have a lot of um my soul doesn't get it, right? Like I'm there's a deep sense of injustice that that will really bother me, and I feel like at sometimes will keep me from states of maybe more empathy or forgiveness for things like that are probably ultimately where all this needs to go, right? It doesn't do me any good to carry that around, but I do struggle letting that go sometimes.
Yeah, me too. I think that's part of the human experience is we're these little nodes in this whole array of other nodes that are all reflecting each other, and there's some that are disproportionately affecting the experience of everyone else. And there's a lot of discomfort in that. I'm just looking at the time, and I think that we could go on talking forever. That's why we created a podcast so that we could. But keeping it to these little concise packages is part of what it takes. Yeah, I think we should land the plane for now. You're headed
Let's do
off
it.
to all of these adventures. I think we'll be doing a couple episodes in between.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, any other final thoughts? You want to put a bow on the capsule?
Man, might be out of bows, but I'm really looking forward to the next one, man. This was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, yeah, this is the Refound podcast. It is on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts. We'll be making more of them more frequently with different voices, guests, but a lot of it will be on this path of inquiry that we just talked about. I know that I'm really excited to get some of these thinkers and experiencers and teachers in the chair to answer some of these same questions that we're noodling through. Be fun.
Looking forward to it, man.
Cool. All right. Well, until next time. Cheers, Graham. Thanks.
All right. Cheers, man.
Cool.
Sweet.
No editing needed.